So staying still or staying rigid is failure, because as this has shown us, just when you think you've been thrown curveballs, guess what? You know, it's like the part of a contract that nobody ever reads, but it's like mentions force majeure, and you're like, that act of God.
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling.
So I'm going to explain it this way.
Okay.
Somebody once asked me what my career path was, and I said, I don't have a career path, I have a career wandering. It just happened to be that I realized that the point that I'm at, it's like if you know, one of these things, and it got to here, and I was like, if you'd have told me I'd have gotten here from where I started, I wouldn't have expected that one whatsoever.
Yeah.
I have, through a number of years, been what I realized basically in a lot of, or not all the aspects of media and technology, from creation to distribution to the endpoint. And I didn't set out for that, but over the course of different jobs and different paths, I've touched a lot of the different layers of, from making the content and planning the content, to distributing the content, to the platforms that you watch it on, to the, you know, the end product. And it's been, you know, I started life as a technologist and electrical engineer, working, building set-top boxes and cable modems, you know, from a company that supplied technology for cable companies.
Okay.
And in the early part of my career, I was, you know, going out and explaining it right at that cusp where we were transitioning from analog distribution to digital distribution and cable TV. I was, you know, the invention of the cable modem and basically the launch of the World Wide Web. Right, that was my, that tells you how old I am. Right there, that was the influx of my career, to be out there telling a cable operator, you know, okay, here's what a cable modem is, and then backing up and saying, here's what the internet is useful for. And here's what the World Wide Web is, right? And this was literally like in the midst of the people. I remember the academic debates, because there was like two different groups debating about what the protocol for the web was going to be.
Wow.
You know, so this was before it became HTTP.
Mm-hmm.
It was like there was two different groups, and they were arguing back and forth, and one group won out, and here we are. So it was that esoteric moment, and so yeah, it took an interesting series of twists and turns. And the other statement to my career is, I don't seem to do anything different. I just now seem to do it for different people, because
okay.
Even different jobs or different like organizations, I'm like, oh, I'm, you know, the body, the reason that people bring me in on things and things like that is that kind of corner back to, you understand this. It's just different companies have had me come at it from different directions. So
I like it.
there's the long and extended bio.
It's excellent.
And I haven't said any company names or, you know, so, you know.
I know. Well, we will have,
We'll get there.
if people want to reach out to you, we will have a place for your information in the show notes. So
the LinkedIn's, you know, is an open book of what I am.
Well, good. Well, let's jump in. These are, as the format always is with Learning to Swim, you have not been prepped on any of these questions. And it really is, most of the questions were formulated pre-COVID, which is, I find, somewhat interesting. And we are, just to acknowledge that we are several months into COVID, so it's a different time for a lot of us. And so I'm going to jump right in. What does resilience mean to you?
So resilience means to me sort of dealing with the adversity of it all, and being able to cope with it, and that's very simply, you know, looking for the angles when the obvious isn't there.
Have you found during the last several months, has there been kind of an ebb and flow to kind of where you're at in terms of how resilient you feel, or
Oh,
are
sure. Yeah. I mean, I mean, let's face it, as professionals, uh, I currently work at a company called Digital Domain, and been here for over 2 years now as an executive producer. And so, being in business and then working as a business to virtualize everybody, and just thinking of your beginning of the year forecasting to what it is now, right? Like, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this, and being surprised at what held, what didn't hold, like, not anticipating this. It's, everybody calls it the new normal, but I don't think we're normal or the new. It's like,
right?
it's the new ever changing. It's having a family, the homeschooling, all of these things. I I never anticipated, because I started looking at my career, and I've been more in the very people oriented, working with teams, managing teams at times, very much industry connections. So it was like, I'm always going to have to be in the mix. I'm always going to be there. I'm not one of those people that can, live in Timbuktu and be programming. Not that there's anything wrong with living in Timbuktu or Poughkeepsie. This is my other reference. I've been to Poughkeepsie though. And being able to do my job remotely. I was like, oh, I've never, the kind of stuff I do is just not going to be able. Suddenly, I was doing my job remotely, and I was managing a team and driving projects. And so this summer, being able to go to the cottage and be able to spend 2 months there working remotely, where before it's like send the family to the summer vacation and go check in.
Mm-hmm.
I was there, and it was suddenly like, oh, well, this is new, and this is gonna work, and what does that mean for the future? And so that's really the kind of, and it goes back and forth. And you're like, can we do this? And should we do this? And should we live where we are? How long is this going to last? And I think the not knowing when things will change or get back to something is the biggest unknown.
It's that uncertainty that creates uh, that underlying kind of anxiety that it's there. And we like, I think as humans, we like a degree of certainty in our
Sure.
lives, and certainly in our professional lives, for sure.
Yeah, I guess I've just always been engaged, in businesses where every time you think there's something for certain, it's not. I've always, my career has been a series of unpredictability or changes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I worked at Microsoft for about 8 years and loved it and enjoyed it and did a lot of great things there, and then got an opportunity to basically completely change my career and go travel the world and take photographs for a living. I came to Yahoo because a colleague of mine had moved down and was putting an adventure travel series together. And this was really before travel blogs and things like that. And it was an adventure travel series, and we were shooting and producing around the world. And so I stepped into the role of a producer and a content creator, and kind of like complete right turn for my career. But and it was a lot of soul searching, because I was like, oh, I'm stepping off this treadmill and I'm stepping over here, and what does that mean? And and everybody was like, well, that sounds awesome and you should go do that. And so I did, and I don't regret that to some degree. It was like amazing experiences, and kind of opened my eyes, maybe Actually, the only regret I think I have is that it suddenly made me yearn to do more of that.
Mhm.
And knowing that and knowing what can happen, like once you step off of one path and you step over and you're like, the grass maybe is not greener, but it's a different shade and it's really cool. Yeah, always a challenge.
So then tell me what failure looks like to you.
Oh gosh, I think failure to me is not being able to adapt, being rigid. Um, that's, it's the and I think again, this pandemic has shown people it doesn't, you could have the best of plans, the top, tightest plan, client that said yes, everybody going in, and then it was no,
Right.
right? And nobody's fault necessarily. Like,
Right. Right.
so that, so yeah, I mean, a project that goes south because the client is no longer able to, you can't, you gotta, you gotta move in a different trajectory. And so staying still or staying rigid is failure because as this has shown us, just when you think you've been thrown curveballs, guess what? It's like the part of a contract that nobody ever reads, but it mentions force majeure, and you're like, that act of God. Guess
Yeah.
what? We just now found how well those parts of those contracts are written. It's
I
like
know, right? Uh,
crazy.
it is crazy. Well, I would agree with that so much is yes, an inability to adapt or remain flexible.
Mhm.
I very much I see that. So conversely, I think what if you could talk, one of the things that I think is so important as we, in order for us to remain, you know, nimble and adaptable, having a level of curiosity is, I feel like, kind of a prerequisite for that. So
Oh yeah.
how do you stay curious?
Fear. Um, it's it's the second time today that I've used that word uh, in different contexts, but I stay curious because I feel like I need to, right? I feel like if I'm not learning, eh, and I'm on the sort of a forefront of a lot of changing technologies in the media space. I'm been on the interactive immersive media space for a very long time and various iterations of that, whether it's interactive TV or VR or it's the blending of the world of gaming and traditional entertainment. And there's always something new to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
there's always something that I'm constantly trying to catch up with. And, feeling like if I'm not learning the new things, I'm going to fall behind.
Okay.
So it's that healthy amount of fear that keeps me curious of going, well, I gotta know what's going on. And yeah,
So it's not necessarily a luxury for you to be curious, it's a necessity.
I think it's a necessity. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, so just the next easy question, what is your secret or not so secret to a meaningful life?
You call that easy? Um, gosh,
Maybe simple, not easy, right?
and you know what? That is probably not it's neither simple nor easy in the sense of I think that's always the big challenge. I think there's a lot of settling that people do. I think there's a lot of people going accepting, okay, this is the way it is, and I think it's constantly challenging and being able to balance those things out. It's you know the traditional work-life balance. Well, that's been thrown into chaos, but it's maybe that's good because it's maybe we're home more now in good ways and bad ways, and trying that out. And you know, if you know, there were a lot of, if you would have gone to people in January and said, we're going to make you stay home more often, people have been like, what? You know,
Right.
like, really? Please? You know, like, and now we are, and people are like, no, don't make me stay home. You know, but I think it's that true, find that balance, right? You know, I do believe in love what you do and do what you love. And I've had more or less of that throughout my career. And I've, like I said, when I made that right turn from Microsoft, I loved what I did at Microsoft. I was a technical evangelist.
Mhm.
You know, I loved that job. I really enjoyed it. And but then I went off and told stories for a living, that mattered and changed people's lives, and I loved that too. And I found that what I found is that there's a lot of things I love, and it's being able to balance doing different things. But I also found that I can love doing a lot of things, and that it isn't just one thing that's going to give me joy and happiness. And you know, it's a family, it's friends, it's colleagues, it's work, it's hobbies. You know, somebody goes, what's your hobbies? And I have to think about it, and like, because hobbies and life blend together, and it's like,
Right.
yeah, do I have a specific thing? I don't go and do woodworking, for example. I kind of
Right.
just, don't have like, but um yeah, it's those kinds of things. So
Sounds good to me. So, have you developed, would you be willing to share with us? Do you have a simple daily habit that you've adopted during this most recent time to I don't know, whether it's kind of keep you in balance or keep you engaged? Anything that you'd be willing to share?
sure, I mean, go back to fear. um no, it's just like, you know, it's interesting is this, that we've uh in my work life now, and the industry, it's like people have adapted, right? I think the key thing is to stay in touch with people. um, for me, you know, I'll get out and go for a run in the morning. um, you know, it's some of those things, like I tried to do it, you know, when I was commuting. Now I don't commute. So it's finding those ability, like simple things like listening to NPR in the morning. You know, I can go do that on my run, because that way, because I used to do that like when I was driving. Well, I'm not doing that. So it's getting some of those things that I need on a daily basis that wouldn't necessarily. I mean, my job has been very interactive. I manage a team. You know, this is part of it. The connecting with people electronically and remotely has been something that I've had to continue to do. And finding that that's the super important thing, is continuing to keep up with those connections, even though we have to do it distantly and remotely. You know, I mean, I think I've been lucky enough that I wasn't instantly, you know, working at home by myself, shut in, not talking to anybody. My job was very much a communicate with the team. Suddenly I had team meetings in the morning and team meetings in the evening. I see more of my team now than I probably did when I was at the office. And then, you know, figuring out the family dynamic and juggling that, always crazy. But
Good. Well, thank you. So I am always curious to ask people about their first job or their first task that they were ever paid for. So it can be when you were a child or high school or whenever you did that and what that was.
I usually win. You know, it's the worst job, and I usually win this one.
Okay.
And it wouldn't worst job, but you know, when I describe it, people go, ooh. Um, Now I grew up in a very, 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 very small, outside of a small town in Colorado. So it was a rural, very rural setting, a lot of ranching and a lot of coal mining, actually. So I grew up in a small valley, about 5 miles from town, next to a coal mine that my father operated. an underground coal mine. And so my father, being a very practical engineer, when I said, I need to make money, he looked at me and went, first, I love this man for him. He looked at me and goes, why? Don't I provide things that you need? Yes, yes, food, clothing, yeah. I was like, you got me there. And, but he was like, I get it. You want to make some money, and it was, I don't know, buy comic books, whatever it is.
Well, and how old are you at this point?
I was in teens.
Okay.
Teens. So, and this probably violates various labor codes, but it's been the statute of limitations so long, as my father was like, great. One of the things that needs to be done is when the coal comes out of the mine, it's in a big pile.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be separated. And there's machines to separate it into all sorts of sizes, except for people in the community would burn lumps of coal in their fireplaces because it burns overnight very long. That needed to be separated by hand. So my job at $2 a ton was to take the front end loader, upend it, and then by hand transfer the large chunks of coal into the front end loader, where I would drive it over, weigh it, and then get paid $2 a ton. So that was my job.
Wow.
And, mind you, I mean, I grew up now, when you compare notes with some of the kids I grew up, they grew up on ranches. Mm-hmm. And, their jobs were messy animal related activities.
Well, that's what I thought you were going to say, because you were saying how rural it was. And then, yeah.
$2 a ton. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I kind of wish I was digging ditches or doing, random things with, animal related things, because, shoveling poo would probably be better than tossing coal. I don't know. It's a toss up.
I don't know. I can't really speak to, I mean, I've mucked a few, stables, but it was never a very consistent thing. So I can't speak to that. But so do you see any connection to that first job to what you do currently, or kind of how did it inform your professional life?
I think if I think about it, and in college, it was never shying away from manual labor. And do I do manual labor now? Not really. I mean, can schlep things in the backyard or whatever, but what it's I guess set me up for a life of not shying away from the dull or the just needs to get done.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say, there's profoundness here, but I've done all sorts of gigs. Or, when I was shooting around the world, we were a small team, and, we're schlepping stuff and things like that. Is that I guess it's, the grunt work. I've done the grunt work. And did it set me up for that? Not sure. But like I said, kind of know what grunt work is, and I've done that. And by comparison, most stuff ain't so bad.
Right.
It's sort of
and it's just so I have I guess all of them now of my kids are in their 20s, and
it's good that
we had a recent birthday, so that's why I'm blanking here. But there is kind of a I too grew up doing the grunt work, and you just always pitch in and you do what needs to be done. And I've worked, for myself and for small businesses where everybody's got to do everything. And so I think that's a tremendously valuable lesson, is to be willing to kind of do it all.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
And again, it gives you perspectives of the things you don't want to do.
Absolutely. And I am a big believer in, sometimes it's almost easier if you're kind of a little bit, searching. It's almost easier to start by figuring out what you don't want to do.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. It's where do your boundaries, right? Like, do you have boundaries? What are the things? Because I think sadly, I think there's more in the realm of what don't I want to do, and not I think there's more. I have a harder time saying what are the one thing I want to do,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
there's so many different interesting things out there in the universe that you know, I need another bounding box. If that makes sense.
I'd absolutely. I mean, I think that you know, particularly when I look at kind of younger adults, I mean, there's just this, you know, well, it's that paradox of choice, right?
Mm.
That actually more choice
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily doesn't make for better choices and doesn't make for more quote unquote happiness. So
Right.
it's interesting. So if you were to say, what is your in plain sight talent? What is that thing that you do really, really well? And if I were to kind of ask 5 of your friends or colleagues, they'd say, "Oh yeah, John really does this well."
If I was to say that, I would hope, uh, and I think is the one thing I do overall is I think I'm able to relate to a lot of different people. And it has served me well in life and business, and it's just being able to relate to different people for different reasons, um, be able to communicate with them, be able to share perspectives, and that, you know, there's all sorts of technology capabilities and things like that, but just that ability to work with people and to reach people and to communicate has been something that I would call that's my superpower.
Yeah, I would say that is definitely a superpower. And then, are there any kind of less obvious or more hidden talents that you would be willing to share with us?
Oh, that's a fine question. I've had some esoteric talents or activities in my life. Um, there was a stint of improv acting for a Renaissance festival that included jousting.
Ah,
Um, I I I spent a period of my life uh, purposefully falling off a horse.
okay.
And that's what professional jousting in a acting scenario means.
Yeah,
Gracefully trying to leave a horse while a perfectly good running horse. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And hopefully not hurting yourself.
The scars don't show,
Oh.
and I
Oh,
don't even
very
walk with a
cool.
limp much. No. Um,
Oh, so the other thing that I like to ask people is there a book that you're currently reading that you would recommend?
what's that? One more time. Wait a minute.
A book that you're currently reading that you
Oh,
would
book I'm
recommend?
currently reading. Gosh, uh, I wish I had some pithy, ways to make your life better books. I spend a lot, and I've just found myself more audiobooks. Um, I do a ton of science fiction and fantasy reading.
Oh yeah.
So, it's for pleasure. I mean, because I tend to absorb more of my business, uh, a lot of periodicals and online news. So when I'm reading, I tend to absorb myself into more the escaping, and enjoying fun fantasy series.
Oh,
Uh, so
I'm right there with you. Yeah. No, and there is a a real reason for reading fiction. So it's no need to apologize. Uh, can you think of what your favorite book was as a child that was either read to you or that you read to yourself?
gosh, there've been so I don't mean to say this wrong. There's been so many books I've enjoyed. I mean, it's just kind of funny because I started like right around Anne McCaffrey, Dragon Riders of Pern. I did the Lord of the Rings. I was probably I was young when the Lord of the Rings happened. it was out long before that, but when I dove into it, I was young and it's dense. Um, but that like I dove into the sort of science fiction and fantasy early and just never looked back. So those were like some of the, like I remember those are like, oh, those books. And
Yeah.
um, but it's, and it's just, dipping my toe into, and occasionally reading interesting things. Oh gosh, what's his name? Why am I getting, oh, this is going to embarrass me because I wasn't thinking about it and I'm terrible with names. Yule, Sapiens. He wrote Sapiens. And
Oh, yes.
okay, now I'm
No,
gonna switch.
now we're both
Now we're just both looking. Yeah, we should edit
yeah,
this.
we're like, oh God, yes.
And I apologize to the author and everybody that's read him and he's going. They're all screaming the name and telling me.
Well, we'll make sure that we put in the
I've enjoyed it. A couple of his books, and yeah, again, dove into them. Um I enjoyed, and look, there's a bunch of Guns, Germs, and Steel, and I'll dive into some of those periodically. And I find them fascinating. It's just, I guess, because I'm so busy at work and trying to stay up on the latest what's next and things like that, that I'm not diving into some of these more or novels that I really should. So it's the one area that if I had more time or could carve out something, probably, quality just reading would be something I would like say, please, I want more of that. But it conflicts with my video game playing.
well,
So,
there you go. I know. I know.
which I also do. So I admit that.
So what would be, if you could describe your professional journey in a word, what would that be?
In a word.
I know, it's tough.
Eclectic.
Okay. And one word to describe your life, and that can be kind of at this moment or up until this point.
Full.
That's so nice. So where is your next trip and when?
The funny part is, if you would have asked me that 6 months ago, that would have been a much different story. I have my family and I have a very not jet set, wandering, love to travel, feel twitchy when I don't have an airplane ticket to somewhere for work or pleasure, and have been a lot of amazing parts of the world, and a lot more to go. My child has been in 27 countries.
Wow.
I'm sorry, 8, almost 9. It's so I was supposed to be in a number of different places. Last week I was supposed to be in Taiwan teaching a workshop. So I'm not sure is the honest answer. Maybe Yosemite for getting away from it all. I didn't anticipate being able to spend all summer at the cottage in the Canadian woods. So it's, bit of a don't necessarily know, and it'll depend on what's going on, how far afield I get.
I know what you mean. Well, so one kind of final question around, you mentioned that you've been communicating a lot with your team, and I do a lot of work around employee engagement. So what would be what's the one takeaway that you have, or a couple of takeaways that you have from having more consistent communication? Because I know that some folks, it's like some folks are feeling like there's not enough communication with their teams. Some feel like, oh my gosh, there's too many meetings. So how do you strike that balance and keep the content, or the meetings relevant.
Sure. I mean, the struggle is always real. Even, I mean, let's face it, we were, one could argue we had too many meetings before all of this happened, and
Right.
now too many meetings that are, video oriented. I think the reality is that it's, always be willing to listen, be able to be flexible, right? Like there's some days where we're like, do we need the meeting at 4:30?
Mm.
No, we're all good, or we're all busy. Okay. It's it's that flexibility, to ask yourself, "Well, do we need a meeting? Do we need an hour for a meeting?"
Right.
It's to always challenge why you're doing it. Because I think we all slip into a bit of a mechanic,
Hmm.
and then you have to ask yourself, do we need that?
Right.
Look, I mean, the agile process in software development is very interesting in that sort of daily stand-ups, the quick check-ins, standing up because you don't want everybody just kind of lounging at, it's like 15
Right.
minutes in, out. There's something to those kind of things. And some of that process can be, again, develop that. Some of the communication has been, look, I mean, there's a healthy amount of joking and laughing, and I would hope, and I think that some of that is it's touching base, because we're not going and seeing each other
Right.
for a chuckle over lunch. We're not, having that moment of the water cooler. So when else are we going to get that? And everybody potentially being trapped at home, where their family is this close and needs a bit of a moment that is a step out. And so trying to balance that is an interesting one. The being able to communicate with somebody, like, somebody once said it, but I think it's you know, why do a video call if a quick chat will do, right?
Hmm.
Like if you just need a quick answer.
Hmm.
Um, is it does we love our email, right? And email went from nowhere to suddenly our lives. And there's some people that only communicate like through Slack now. Not sure any one of these is the right answer.
Right.
But, people starting to understand what these communication methods are for. And we as professionals are evolving in our styles of communication, right? Like it used to be face-to-face meetings and faxes. Before then, a phone call, fax,
Mhm.
like, and then the introduction of email, like, it, sure, if I say this to Evan, people are going to nod their heads, is like, you've had that email where somebody sends it to you thinking it's an instant response mechanism.
Right.
You want an instant response, you probably ought to call somebody. Or now chat starts taking the place of the calling, but
Yeah.
still there's these understanding the mediums and everybody working in that same moment of operation, or same rules, helps. But we constantly are changing the rules. So that's the fascinating thing is that,
Yeah.
and people that are working that didn't work with email, that worked with email, are different than people that have always worked with email, are different than people that have experienced always working with instant messaging
Hmm.
services of various kinds.
Right.
And then there's the tendrils of communication. Is it a text chat? Is it an online chat? Is it you know, so we are having to learn those and to find those rules and boundaries constantly. And that's something that an underlying for a professional just has to cope with, because
Yeah.
those are the things that we don't think about, but are the things that will bog you down.
Well, I love that. I yes, I agree wholeheartedly to assign the right medium to kind of the desired result in some ways, or whatever the task is, and then having that clearly defined for the team or within the organization, I think can be so helpful, and to recognize that it's probably uh, it's probably always changing and evolving to a certain degree.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, is there any question that I didn't ask you that you would like to?
Always so many. and so many directions to go. I think it's just been fun to chat about this kind of stuff, and to step out of the one particular aspect, and just to kind of go back and reflect on some of these things. So that's always fun.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you sharing with us today, and I know that I have some takeaways, and I'm sure that our audience will as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Happy to help.
Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.